First of all, I really want to apologize to any who belong to this diocese, maybe come from another parish, because last week you had supposed to have had a letter read from our bishop. I wasn't here, and I did not want to impose that on the missionary who was here. So we do have a letter from the bishop today, which I will address, and I promised you 2 weeks ago that we would address some of what's been going on in terms of what the news is presenting. Certainly the darkest moment in our American Catholic history, the darkest moment. So please give me a few extra minutes this morning, because we need to grow in our awareness, and we need to grow in awareness of how maybe to respond. Because as Catholics, it's Jesus, it's the church that we belong to and certainly want to protect. So we look at those in reality that the second reading talked about avoid, if you will, the way of the world. Well, sometimes people fail to do that. The gospel mentions certainly some evils that should never be a part of the church, but they do creep in. So I'd like to read the letter from, actually I don't want to like to read it, but I will, because he said to. He says, "Dear faithful of the Diocese of Springfield, Cape Girardeau, let me begin by saying I love the church and everything about her. I love the sacraments, our theology, our saints, the Blessed Mother, our liturgical year, our prayers, our devotions and feasts, and our architecture, just to name a few. Because of this great love, I have given my life to the church. Because of this great love, I am devastated by the recent Pennsylvania grand jury revelations of sexual abuse and the subsequent cover-up from the highest levels of the church, as I am sure you are too. The reality is that because of the ecclesial misdeeds perpetrated against children and vulnerable adults, many have been physically, sexually, and emotionally scarred. When they cried for help, bishops ignored those cries. The very church they believed in, the priests, the bishops they trusted with their salvation and as guides of the faith, ended up betraying them and inflicting unspeakable harm. Then they harmed them further through their silence and inaction. If you weren't aware, most of the discussion in the Pennsylvania report concerns abuses before the early 2000s. By finding almost no cases after 2002, the grand jury's conclusions are consistent with previous studies showing that the Catholic Church reforms in the United States drastically reduce the incidence of clergy abuse. That does not mean there is not more work to do. The Holy See has encouraged continued reform and vigilance at all levels of the Catholic Church to help ensure the protection of minors and vulnerable adults from harm. As Pope Francis said this week in his letter to the faithful, looking back to the past, no effort to beg pardon and to seek to repair the harm done will ever be sufficient. Looking ahead to the future, no effort must be spared to create a culture able to prevent such situations from happening, but also to prevent the possibility of their being covered up and perpetrated. As your shepherd, I am sorry for any hurt inflicted upon anyone in the diocese. I apologize publicly to any individual who has been harmed by someone entrusted with their care and who has suffered in silence. I can assure you that as your bishop, I pledge my commitment to combat every form of abuse. I humbly beg your forgiveness of our church, and I ask you to pray for our diocese and myself as the church seeks to heal these wounds and takes actions to prevent them from happening again. I am committed to breaking the dark cloak of mishandling and silence, and will take measurable steps toward healing. After the revelations in Pennsylvania, people are wondering, well, what about us, the Diocese of Springfield, Cape Girardeau? The diocese is currently aware of 9 priests who are no longer active in the ministry with credible allegations of abuse against a minor, and all of these have been previously reported. The diocese policy on sexual abuse is very clear. A report of these allegations is made to law enforcement. Our internal diocesan review board reviews the allegations, and pastoral care and counseling are offered to the alleged victim. Our Holy Father encouraged us this week to give witness in action to a culture of care that says never again, to every form of abuse, This calls for both personal and communal conversion that enables us the strength, heart, grace, and courage necessary to truly be thy brother's keeper. In order to take action to be accountable and ensure accuracy, transparency, and truthfulness, I am calling for an independent review of all diocesan personnel files, clerical, religious, and lay staff. Once we have completed this process and in consultation with our Safe Environment Review Board, the diocese will issue findings. Be assured that we are actively engaged in creating environments and reporting mechanisms so that both children and adults are safe and free from abuse, trauma, or injury, and may successfully report any instance of misconduct and be confident of our swift action. While our policies and procedures carefully outline our expectations, the ramifications and consequences if there are violations, no piece of paper can take the place of a vigilant adult who takes to heart the role of keeping people safe, children and adults alike. One who is called to action when he or she has reason to suspect abuse, whether with a child or another adult. We must live the zero tolerance we profess. We do this by the active participation of all the members of the body of Christ. The annual Diocesan Code of Conduct that is signed by every clergy, employee, and volunteer has as its top priority procedures for reporting abuse. We have clear, swift, and immediate actions that take place when allegations are made. I ask that all members of the community embrace this important mission. In the interest of openness, I do want to disclose that we recently placed a pastor on administrative leave for sexual misconduct with an adult over the internet. The diocese also just became aware of a lawsuit that alleges a former employee made inappropriate advances on an adult, and we are investigating those allegations. I hope this reassures you that we are following our policies and procedures, and I encourage anyone to notify the diocese and law enforcement if they have any claims of sexual abuse or misconduct against our religious or lay staff. Just this past year, William Holtmeyer, Director of the Office of Child and Youth, included several specific red flag behaviors to our safe environment procedures. Behaviors that include, for example, issues of exploitation and enticement. We have in place a safe student policy addressing harassment, discrimination, and violence by employees, other students, and third parties. We must stand united in this work. This past March and May, I celebrated healing masses in New Madrid and Poplar Bluff, respectively. Additional masses are planned at St. Agnes Cathedral on September 25th, 7 p.m., and St. Peter the Apostle in Joplin on October 8th, also at 7. Please consider attending one of these upcoming liturgies as a sign of support to those who have been harmed. Our ultimate goal is healing and restoring trust. The church belongs to Christ. He is the way, the truth, and the life. With the active participation of each one of us, the renewal of this church will be successful in creating the necessary dynamics for sound and lasting change. Please join me in uniting your prayers and sacrifices with Christ and the entire church for the healing of those who have been abused, for a greater fidelity to Christ's teachings, and for an increase in holiness. That can only happen with an honest conversation about the root causes of this crisis and through the purification the Lord wants for his church. As Pope Francis has said, may the Holy Spirit grant us the grace of conversion and the interior anointing needed to express before these crimes of abuse our compunction and our resolve courageously to combat them. Bishop Edward Rice, August 20th, 2018. This was supposed to have been read last week. I'm sure the bishop probably today wishes he had waited at least one more week. If you're aware, last weekend, the World Council of Families meeting in Ireland, the Pope gave a speech there about this very issue. But at the same time, there was a letter released by, 11-page letter, by Cardinal Bagnano, who was the Apostolic Nuncio in the United States. Cardinal Bagnano has had a very hard life within the church, very important a respected life, respected by many. Cardinal Boiano has made a number of charges in that letter: time, place, date, what is said, and what happened. If the bishop had waited one more week, he might have had second thoughts. Because if you listen to any of his report, you probably wonder, how can we listen to the bishop? The Pope himself was apparently complicit. How do we listen to anybody when Cardinal McCarrick was on the Child Welfare Council that come up with all these guidelines for priests and laity, but they did not apply to the bishops themselves? How do you listen? Be vigilant. Be vigilant. I've spent the last couple of weeks just trying to do more than understand. Understand. I have lived in such... Van Buren just celebrated my birthday this morning. You all celebrated a couple of weeks ago, but they gave me ice cream cake. I'm sorry I was not here last week, but our whole family gathered here at Sunset Point. And a little brother came back from his third duty and tour in Kuwait. We got there at 6:30 Sunday morning. Of course, we had to leave by 11, but the whole family was together for a couple hours. So thank you for doing without and waiting till the day for this. In understanding, like I say, I've probably lived in a very protected life. The song that keeps going through my mind is, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. I think I'm Grandpa, because I've lived those good old days. Days that younger priests today will never see again because of a few. And I mean a few in the church who have ignored the gospel, who have ignored basic human decency, if you will. So how does this happen? How does it go on? I look at my life and I think of things going through my mind, and how was I so protected? Grew up in one thing, is in a little Catholic community. Glenville, Sister CJ's here. She grew up there. That community was formed by Catholics from different parts of the country for one purpose, to be a Christian community. So we had a tremendous support system, if you will, and a protection in growing up and then having a Catholic school at the same time. But I also lived in Virginia during grade school years. And looking at that experience in terms of, again, protection. I, as a child, had been with priests alone a number of times, different priests. Never was there a thought of any problem. Say, wow, they're part of my family. That's what I wanted. Mom and Dad raised me in that choir loft. They were both in the choir. I'm sorry, I apparently didn't inherit that. And you don't get it by osmosis, apparently, either. But that was great growing up there. I asked to serve at the age of 7, and in those days you had to know Latin. And I'm grateful for that. But the altar has always been the place where I knew I belonged. And looking at those years to say, what happened? Now, those were years when we got up in the morning, even in the city with the Naval Air Base right there. Mom and Dad didn't know where we were all day. We felt safe within the church and within society. We were safe compared to how many sex trafficking kidnappings you see today. We were safe. We could go almost anywhere and not worry. So growing up in that, and then coming back to Missouri, being sent off to a seminary at 13. Seminary where you live in a dorm with a bunch of boys, and went to a girls' co-ed school, all right, for high school. But never did I experience at any time any of these kind of behaviors that suggested alternate lifestyles. And I go from there to Little Rock for college. Strangely enough, college taught mainly by priests from Pennsylvania, which is the area that's being charged. And I never encountered anything from among any of them. And then to go from there to St. Maarten, Indiana, where a number of our seminarians, and it's the largest seminary in the United States, the largest seminary. How could I be so protected? A number of young men were there from 2 different dioceses in Pennsylvania. No problems at all. Now, do people go to the seminary for wrong motives? Well, yes. So some of those guys were there to avoid the Vietnam War that some of you endured. That was a good way to get a free pass, if you will. Sometimes God uses bad motives to lead in good directions. Poverty sometimes leads people to the seminary. But for the most part, no. There was no sign of this alternate lifestyle that we see continuing to multiply in our society, the culture of the world. How did I escape all of that? And strangely enough, only after I'm ordained, of course I hitchhiked, used to. I was picked up a couple times by interesting characters, that want to take you off to the side road somewhere. But strangely enough, only as a priest did I ever encounter a pass from someone else on a homosexual level, and it was a Protestant minister. There is a culture in our society that says no one can live without sex. No one. That's the culture. And so if that's the culture, you believe it, you can understand where maybe a Protestant minister might think in that direction, or why some would enter a seminary with wrong ideas. Whatever the case, we look at how this happened, and I thank God. I thank God for you all. Now, this is my first assignment, 1977. Coming here, I came to my family. Coming here, I came to what I had dreamed of as a young man wanting to become a priest. Not to be part of a monastery, but to be part of a church family. That your family was my family. Your children were my children. And I experienced that. I think of the Friday nights where I used to drive this 5,000-mile circuit, picking up our junior high kids that would be able to come and bring them here for overnights, to have recreation and learn something about the faith. And how trusted I was. It's hard to believe, especially looking at today. And of all things, as much as I feel hurt by what has happened, I feel hurt most of all because of our young priests coming up. They will never experience your family as their family. Not with the code that we have today, not with the culture we have today. I was in a young family not long ago. They didn't belong to my parish. They had 5 young ladies, young girls in the family. Boy, they wanted to be all over you, just to welcome the priest to the house. Sit down. And Dad looked at me and I told him, well, with virtues, with our training, can't do that. He said, this is my house, I make the rules. Yeah, I'm sorry. No, you don't make the rules anymore. When it comes to the behavior of priests, of church personnel, you don't make the rules. The diocese is very clear on how behavior must be. And so these young men will never experience what it is to be that kind of member of your families. As I look over those years, I think of, strangely enough, coming here, being on the Child Welfare Advisory Council here in the county. And on that council, being part of the process of trying to help families get their young people back in their homes if they were taken away for some reason. I was asked to take care of children at different times, here and in Crothersville, and never thought a bit about it. That can never happen again. But being on this advisory board here, would you believe that one of our trainings in order to help people get back is that there's progression in behavior. And we had a speaker come from another state, I probably shouldn't say his name of the state anymore, from another state who was a welfare council worker, who said, as an example of getting children back in the home, we had a young girl who was being abused by her dad. And they got it to where she wasn't being abused even once a month anymore, so that was okay. We're making progress. It's like, no, that is not progress. No. It should never be back in the home. But I tell you, we're a different day, a different time, as we try to understand. We try to understand what happened when the news hit about Boston a few years ago. Cardinal Law, our bishop, a tremendous pastoral man who was a convert to the faith. Cardinal Law loved the church, loved your family, loved priests and the sacraments more than you can imagine. Part of his downfall, as I look at it, was that he believed that if God gave you the grace to be a priest, God was going to give you the grace to live like you should live. He believed that if you went to confession and God gave you forgiveness, your life would change and you would not repeat the sin. He was wrong on both accounts. That led to his demise as Bishop of Boston. But certainly it was a different time when you could take the advice of counselors, of psychiatrists, who said, yeah, this man is able to go back into the field. We had an order of priest, Pericles, whose purpose was for that, to help rehabilitate. They thought they could be rehabilitated. It took many years to realize, no, some things you cannot be rehabilitated on. And so we continue to grow and face the evils that do come into the church. That how do we deal with it in this day and age? We need your prayer more than ever, especially after we see the letter that came out this past week with Cardinal Magnano. There will be follow-up. There needs to be complete exposure of all the lies that you and I have been hearing from those who are our leaders in the church. It needs to be clear. Today, I really want to encourage you to pray. Realize that you and I must protect children born and unborn, body, soul, and spirit, whatever it takes. We must be willing to remove that scourge of pornography, of sex trafficking, of child abuse, of abortion. All of these cannot exist in our society. We have to do what it takes. But first of all, we need to pray. I'm asking you to join me in prayer. If you can't hear, at least at home. We will have Holy Hour tomorrow night on Monday nights, once a month, at least first Monday. Mass is going to be 6:30, not 6, followed by Holy Hour. If you like, we're going to have, some of us have been praying at 3 to 5 in the morning. If you like, we're switching that to 4 to 6. If you'd like to come at 5, pray the office of the church with us. At 5:45, we will have the office of morning prayer with communion for those who cannot come to Mass. So if you'd like to be part of the process, please do. But at least pray the rosary. Pray the rosary every day. Many evils have been overcome through it, and we've all let our guard down. I'll certainly try to help keep you updated somewhat as I can understand the events. One of the things that does not make sense yet, maybe you haven't even heard anything on the news, but when we had Boston thing, it was on the news every day, to knock down Cardinal Law. Since Magnano's letter last week, there has been almost nothing on the news. Almost nothing. Why? It tells us the secular news is apparently in favor of the culture because they know that this is also tied up with homosexuality, like it or not. And the secular news does not want that to become part of the news itself. So pray for not only the church, but for our news and for our country, that we do what is right.